Well, it took 15 weeks, but the New Orleans Saints all of a sudden looking healthier than ever. Is it too late, though? We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And I know today's episode of Locked On Saints coming at you a little bit later than usual. Sorry, I've been a little bit under the weather. We're going to be playing a little bit of catch up here. Got your episode today where we're going to take a look at why the New Orleans Saints' success against Matt Ryan could be kind of what it is that the Saints are using, as well as the Falcons are using, to get ready with Desmond Ridder. So we'll break that down. We'll also take a look at Drew Brees' coaching interest. Is it there? Is it not? But first, we're going to start off with the Saints looking healthier than ever, even though it might be a little bit too late. On Saturday, tomorrow, I'll drop a couple of bonus episodes for you. We'll break down Will Levis and how he could potentially fit with the New Orleans Saints as a potential draft pick. And we'll take a look at some key names and personnel that we haven't talked about that the Saints will be getting back next season. So we'll have two episodes for you on Saturday to get you all caught up with all of that. But today, I want to start off with the New Orleans Saints looking healthier than ever. But is it too late? So let's start off with the examples of health that we're starting to see right now. Even though they might not be able to completely benefit from it, they could potentially finally see this week the first snap of the entire intended secondary of the beginning of this season. Marshon Lattimore, Paulson Adebo on the outside, Bradley Roby in the slot, as well as Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu at safety. The Saints have not seen that five-headed dragon that they were supposed to have, that five-headed secondary that they were supposed to have, a single snap so far this season. Now, all of a sudden, Marshon Lattimore, he was working his way back 2 weeks before the bye week, had the bye week, worked his way back throughout this week as well. We asked Chris Richard a little bit about it on Thursday, and the way that he kind of explained it was that it's all about tolerance, right? That it's as tolerated. It's an internal injury. It's not something you're going to look at and say, okay, the bone's not broken anymore, right? It's not that situation. Instead, you kind of have to just trust Marshon Lattimore to tell you honestly how he's feeling. And so you don't want to rush him back. You don't want him to be, disingenuous and try to rush himself back at all. Instead, you kind of want to play this by ear and make sure that you're really managing the tolerance, the pain tolerance around all of it. For those who don't know, it was a lacerated kidney issue, a fairly unique issue that we have seen, out of injuries that we've seen outside of maybe like Frank Ragnow when he fractured his throat years ago. But outside of that weirdness, this was just a kind of a unique and different situation for the New Orleans Saints. So we'll see if the Saints finally get that starting secondary back out there for the first time at all this season. If not, expect to, of course, see Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor across from one another. Pete Werner, the New Orleans Saints second round pick from last year out of Ohio State, who took off early on this season, has missed the last just about nearly handful of games, last 4 or so, or 3 games plus the bye week, but was back at practice speaking with media and had some interesting things to say when he said that he expects that the team will go 4-0 from here on out, which would absolutely be them taking advantage then of the health that they have on the season. Or that they're getting back here at the end of the season. But until we see that, right, hard to tell. But great to see that kind of confidence from him. I think there are a lot of people who were concerned about the locker room giving up and all these other things. A narrative that I don't really like and that I kind of always try to combat against is that idea. And when you see these guys that are like working their way back from injury, trying to get back out on the field, talking about how they're going 4-0 from here on out, like you do love to see that type of confidence. And then another player that could potentially be making a big return this week would be center Erik McCoy. Erik McCoy has missed He missed his 4 weeks as designated when they put him on injured reserve. As soon as he was eligible to return, they designated him to return. He hasn't officially been brought back yet. That would be a Saturday roster move. So we'll be keeping an eye out on those roster moves tomorrow or today, depending upon when you're watching this episode, ahead of the Sunday matchup. But that would be great for the New Orleans Saints too, to get Erik McCoy back. And then you have your entire starting offensive line back, which could potentially help you with where you've been struggling probably the most so far here toward the latter half of the season, which is that inability to get the run game going. And oh, by the way, Saints also claiming Eno Benjamin off of waivers. They tried to claim him after Arizona kind of let him go unceremoniously out of nowhere. We still don't really know what that was about. We do know, though, that there's some things going on in Arizona, so maybe that eliminates things a bit. As then he was recently released by the Houston Texans, but he was released by the Houston Texans because they were getting healthier at that position. Dameon Pierce back, all of these other things. So I don't really question the Texans moving on from him because he didn't get a lot of snaps behind the guys that were there, but he could, because of his unique skill set, see a lot of usage for the New Orleans Saints offense. But the offense still has to sort of figure out how to utilize the unique skill set of the guy that's been on their roster since 2017 in Alvin Kamara. They haven't necessarily mastered that just yet either. So we'll see if they can get either of those things going, but having a healthy offensive line and potentially even being able to get Trevor Penning involved in there so you can see next year's starting offensive line, obviously very important as well. So even though the New Orleans Saints might not be able to fully make good on it over the course of the final 4 games of their season, it is still good to see them finally looking healthy for a change. And if nothing else, you'll accept the fact that, hey, it might ward off some of that bad juju that they've been dealing with over the course of the past few seasons if they can end the season on a high note and in good health. Coming up next, is Drew Brees actually interested in coaching? Well, he answered that question over on WWL Radio yesterday, and you might be a little bit disappointed with the answer. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Tommy John. Tommy John has the absolute best, most comfortable underwear, loungewear, and pajamas that you're going to find anywhere. Don't make all of your loved ones face the dead of winter this holiday season with old t-shirts, ancient underwear, ratty sweats. Have them fight cold and have them do it with cozy by giving them the gift of Tommy John. With over 18 million pairs sold, giving Tommy John has become a bit of a holiday tradition. 97% of women and men love getting the gift of Tommy John. Tommy John doesn't just have customers, y'all. They have fanatics, and I'm absolutely one of them. I've got Tommy John loungewear as well as it's like the sleep thermal shirt and the sleep pants as well. Absolutely love them things. So comfortable, so soft, and allows you to celebrate a little bit of that softness season yourself with the gift of Tommy John underwear, loungewear, and pajamas. Hurry over to Tommy John's Wrap It Up sale. Wrap it up, B, and get 30% off of everything plus free shipping at TommyJohn.com/locked-on. Order now so that your gifts arrive before the holidays. Don't wait. 30% off plus free shipping at TommyJohn.com/locked-on. TommyJohn.com/locked-on. See site for details. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Hey, Drew Brees. Drew Brees taking on a little bit of coaching responsibilities over with his collegiate alma mater, Purdue. It's gotten a lot of Saints fans excited. We got you covered here on Locked On Saints every day as your first listen. Appreciate you making us exactly that. And of course, for your second listen today, make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports Today. Get all the news around the world of sports in around 20-25 minutes. Peter Bukowski and the Locked On local experts. Locked On Sports Today. You can find it wherever you get your podcast. So, Drew Brees has taken a short-term coaching gig, basically as an interim assistant coach with Purdue for the New Year's weekend football game that they're set to take on the LSU Tigers for the Citrus Bowl. That's sparking a lot of hope and a lot of Saints fans that could somehow lead to a long road in which that would end in him returning to the city of New Orleans as a New Orleans Saints coach at some capacity. A lot of people saying offensive coordinator. Now, a lot of folks also pointing to, and I think rightfully so, the Jeff Saturday hire in Indianapolis, because it's like, hey, look, if he didn't have any experience, like Drew Brees at least called his own plays, changed plays of the line, all that. He's got more head coaching experience without coaching an NFL game then Jeff Saturday has head coaching experience without ever having coached an NFL game or any game for that matter, or at least never any collegiate game. So I get the comparisons and all that. There's two things though. Drew Brees is on our Odyssey partner over at WWL Radio, Bobby Hebert, all the other folks. And he was pretty clear that, I'm not really interested in coaching. Just kind of using this as an opportunity to help out his alma mater, basically. When the coach left, they also lost their starting quarterback going into that Citrus Bowl game as well. He jumped in to help out as an interim coach. So he'll be down there. He'll be helping out and everything like that. But that very likely is the end of the coaching road for Drew Brees, who says he's not really interested in that. And I hate to remind you, but the Jeff Saturday hire was a terrible idea and has not worked out for the Indianapolis Colts. So if Drew Brees is going to get into coaching at any point, at least getting a little bit of experience is definitely the better choice here. Now, I would like to point out, just like my good friend Coach Red always made sure to point out to me as well, he could get bit by the bug. It could happen, right? Like he could be out here for this week, kind of doing all of it, and then also being out there on January 2nd for that game, and kind of go, you know what? Yeah, I get it. I could see this, but it feels like that would actually lend itself to him potentially continuing his work with Purdue more than it would him making an immediate jump over to the NFL or anything. But it is a fun storyline. And look, overall, it's cool. Like, it's cool that Drew Brees is doing this. And as a former New Orleans Saint, I get to talk about it, and I love that. But like him as a former New Orleans Saint, if they put me on the field, y'all, your favorite team is in trouble. I played 2 hours of flag football and hurt myself. Y'all need that. But like, it's cool to see Drew Brees doing this. And it does kind of show you that, okay, there is a path for these guys, no matter, if they want to go into media, if media doesn't work out, they want to go into coaching. If they want to go to coaching doesn't work out, they can go to media. They can get involved other ways with teams, things like that too. So we'll see. Maybe this does turn into something for Drew or whatever. We asked Alvin Kamara about it. We really asked everybody about it yesterday, but we asked Alvin Kamara about it, and he was like, I think Drew's just bored. But he did say that Drew was a great coach with the helmet on. He'll have to see what it's like when he's got the headset on. But overall, he believes that Drew Brees is just bored. Now, one of the sort of things that a lot of Saints fans kind of drew a correlation to was this idea that, okay, the Saints could be interested in Sean Payton returning if they don't go back to Dennis Allen. And if Sean is interested, could that eventually lead to a Sean Payton head coach, Drew Brees offensive coordinator? And I'll tell you what, I'll be honest with you, if that were to happen, right, like in the sort of, parallel universe where that does happen somewhere in the multiverse, I see it. Like, I get it. I get the excitement around it because you've seen that offense work with those two. Now, all of a sudden, if they're the ones calling the shots, you got to find the right person to translate it out onto the field. Don't get me wrong. But if they're the ones calling the shots, then, it does make a lot of sense. Those guys were basically the play callers when Sean and Drew were in New Orleans anyway and everything. So I can see why people got so excited about it and everything like that. But it doesn't look like that will come to fruition. It looks like that is very much as I think as some of us always understood it, like, oh, okay, he's doing a favor for his alma mater. He's doing a favor for Purdue. And that's pretty cool. I mean, we should remind ourselves, though, that Drew, did call the plays during the 2-minute drives and 2-minute drills and stuff like that. He was the one that kind of made those decisions as they marched down the field. So you think about him as a situational play caller and all these other things. It's easy to get excited about it. I 100% see it, but doesn't look like that is going to be the case. But it doesn't mean that the coaching staff isn't going to change. It doesn't mean that somebody else won't be calling plays on the offense next season. In fact, I think that's very likely going into 2023, especially when you kind of break down where it is that the team is struggling right now, right? You look at the team that has struggled so far to get the ball in Alvin Kamara's hands in just about any capacity over the course of the past few games. Nick Underhill putting out some great information about that over at NewOrleans.football. But it's clear as day to anybody that watches the game that Alvin Kamara should be more involved in the offense. And could you imagine Drew Brees calling plays for the quarterback to get Alvin Kamara the ball? That would be the essentially the equivalent of a base defense, right? To where you always would come out in that. You would kind of expect that that's what the New Orleans Saints offense would be, with Drew Brees at the helm as the play caller. So there's a part of me that wants to run wild with this idea of what his game flow would be like as a play caller, because it is pretty cool to consider. But if you think about those 2-minute drives, you think about what it is that they were able to exist on, which was trust in the playmakers, which is something I think has been severely lacking in the New Orleans Saints offense so far this season. And I mean, who knows why, right? I mean, we'll discuss this a little bit more here in just a moment, but like that has been something that has completely been missing in this offense is trust in the playmakers. And that was Drew Brees' whole thing. It's the reason why he looked at New Orleans media and was like, oh, who cares about air yards, right? Who gives a crap about air yards? Like if I give the ball to the guy that can turn a -4-yard pass into 67 additional yards and a 63-yard touchdown, and we win games like that, then there you go. So it's really, really interesting to have gone from that to now just a complete absence of that type of thought process. Very, very interesting. Very interesting to have watched over the course of this season. And now the Saints have 4 games left to try to, I mean, some of these guys could be coaching for their jobs. They could be playing for new jobs. They could be playing for extensions, all this. So they got 4 games to get it all done. But it doesn't look like Drew Brees is going to be a part of the competition when that when those offseason decisions begin to be made. So it is a short-term deal for Drew Brees, and it is going to be short-lived unless, as Coach Red mentioned, the bug does get to him. Up next, why the success for the New Orleans Saints historically against Matt Ryan could help them find success against Desmond Ridder on Sunday. We're going to break that down for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Total Wines and More. Total Wine and More, one of my favorite spots. I go to the one over in Metairie all the time to get all of my wines and everything like that. I'm a wine guy. I love me some wine, whiskey. Those are the things that I like. I usually can find both of them over at Total Wine and More and find my favorite ones too, which is what I'm always all about. So this holiday season, find what you love, just like I do, over at Total Wine and More. With so many great bottles to choose from, my personal favorite, like when it comes to whiskey, is like Uncle Nearest, for instance. Always can find it over at Total Wine and More. It's easy to find also that your favorite Cabernet, your favorite Chardonnay, maybe your favorite Riesling if you're a dry wine one, or maybe just different gifts that you're looking for everybody on your list, so that you can also get help from a friendly guide on the way, because Total Wine and More, great customer service as well. All of the confidence in knowing that you're going to find something special at the lowest price doesn't hurt either. So love what you find what you love over at Total Wine and More. Curbside pickup as well as delivery available in most areas. Just visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Drink responsibly. Be 21. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a quick look at the sort of keys to victory for the New Orleans Saints up against the Atlanta Falcons this weekend. Remember, we're going to do what was supposed to be the second Thursday episode. Sorry, y'all, just under the weather. So we're going to have the draft analysis breakdown, which is going to come out tomorrow morning. That's going to be on Will Levis, the Kentucky quarterback. And then tomorrow evening, on Saturday evening, I'll get you the kind of free agent episode. But we're going to really be looking at kind of like the guys that we aren't talking about enough that will be returning to the team next year. And I'm talking about guys like Smoke Monday, for instance, just to give you an idea, like the flavor of what that episode is going to be. And some of the other guys that maybe we're not like talking about enough that are going to be big for the Saints moving forward. But right now, let's focus on the Falcons and the Saints and why the Saints' success against Matt Ryan could benefit them in terms of trying to find success against Desmond Ridder. Let me tell you what's happening here. The New Orleans Saints have been looking at how the Atlanta Falcons utilize Matt Ryan as a means of trying to understand what it is that they're going to add onto the Marcus Mariota game plan with Desmond Ridder at the helm. What I mean by that is, not a ton is going to change in terms of what you saw from the Atlanta Falcons week 1 with Marcus Mariota under center. But the things that do change won't be unfamiliar, because it seems that what the Atlanta Falcons and the New Orleans Saints are using in terms of getting ready for Desmond Ridder is not old Desmond Ridder tape, not just Marcus Mariota tape, but Matt Ryan tape from last year as well. A lot of the players have the overlap there, with the exception of like the younger guys like Drake London, for instance. But a lot of the offensive line has that overlap. Some of the other Zacchaeus and some of the other players, they have that overlap as well. So the Falcons doing something pretty interesting here, and the Saints utilizing kind of that same thought process of what did they do with Matt Ryan? What can they take from that and translate to what has been sort of the Marcus Mariota game plan. So here are a couple of things that you can expect that could look a little bit different. Marcus Mariota, not much of a quick passing game in Atlanta. They weren't afraid to take shots down the field. He just didn't hit them, but they also didn't force him to throw the ball quickly. Matt Ryan got the ball out quickly. Desmond Ridder got the ball out quickly during his time at Cincinnati as well. Expect that to be a big part of Desmond Ridder's game plan, is getting the ball out quickly, distributing to the playmakers around him. Better drop back passer is what you have in Desmond Ridder. So you're also going to allow themselves to take some of the deep shots when they do become available. They like Desmond Ridder's downfield ability, similar to the way that they like Matt Ryan's downfield ability. Desmond Ridder, not the most accurate downfield passer. He was somewhere in the high 20s in terms of his completion percentage downfield at Cincinnati. So he wasn't kind of the biggest guy. I mean, to give you an idea, Will Levis, who we'll talk about tomorrow, around 43% completing 20 plus yards downfield. That's really, really good. And Desmond Ridder wasn't even sniffing that, right? So it's not a situation where they feel like, oh, he's immaculate downfield or anything like that, but he's better than he's better than Marcus Mariota was. So expect to see a little bit of that coming back in. And especially with him being a better drop back pocket passer. That's something that they really like in him, that of course they had in Matt Ryan as well, even though Arthur Smith, there was a little bit of overlap there, not a ton of overlap, right? A year. Screen game. That's going to be a big one too. And you might see that really, really early as well. Even just a wide receiver screen to Drake London on the outside, quick 3-yard pass to Drake London on the outside, something early on in the game to kind of get him in rhythm. So if the Saints can disrupt that rhythm early and disrupt the timing on those timing routes, things like that, then that can go a long way for them. Something to keep in mind though is that the Atlanta Falcons average about 4 points per drive on drives that include a 20-plus yard completion downfield. That's really, really good in terms of like an EPA perspective on top of all of that. So you don't want to give up a lot of completions downfield. While the Saints have had Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu both healthy at the same time, they've been able to keep those pretty much at bay, 1 or 2 in the games where they allow any at all. So you don't want to see the Atlanta Falcons start to buck that trend, because when they complete those, they tend to get on a roll that ends up in some amount of points, right? Them either getting a field goal or a touchdown down the way. All right, a couple of other keys to keep an eye out on here, despite what Aaron Freeman had to say during the Crossover Thursday episode here on Locked On Saints. Cameron Jordan does need to be able to wreck that offensive line in Atlanta. Part of disrupting the timing of that Atlanta Falcons offense is going to be the corners being physical on the outside, which this is what the Saints do. They are a man coverage team. While you see more and more teams throwing these man match concepts where they're all in man coverage unless the receiver runs something that forces you into zone coverage, none of that. The Saints play a little bit of it, not a ton of it, but for the most part, they are a man coverage team. That's what they do. So expect them to work to get those receivers off of their marks, get them off of their timing, and Cam Jordan has to do the same as well, along with the rest of the defensive line. But I'm putting a lot on Cam for this one because he's the leader, he's the guy. So him being able to kind of disrupt the timing from the quarterback spot, going to be huge as well. Linebackers holding strong in the middle of the field, but also being able to break on the perimeter in a strong and quick fashion. So we were talking about sort of those quick passes to the outside to help Desmond Ridder get into rhythm. So the corners on the outside and their perimeter tackling is going to be a big part of that. But the linebackers and second level players being able to get sideline to sideline is going to be big in terms of that as well. But they're going to have to also hold strong in the middle. So they can't get too wrapped up in the eye candy of what's happening on the perimeter, even though they're going to be helpful there, because then you end up forfeiting a little bit of the middle of the field, right? You open up some of that stuff. So you don't want to let that be the case, because Desmond Ridder is going to have that developing directly in front of him and should be able to pick that apart if it's being given to him. Another part of it, and you've heard me talk about this, harp on it a ton, tackling at the catch point. Got to make tackles. If the player catches the ball, make a tackle, bring him down. Don't allow the yak yards. That's where the Saints have kind of shot themselves in the foot with missed tackles, things like that. On the offensive side, you have to get the screen game going, and you got to get the passing game going with Alvin Kamara as well. Like we just mentioned, and we were kind of alluding to earlier on, the Saints have struggled with this. And I understand, like we get told all the time when we ask questions about this, and we ask all the time, why, what, not in these words, but we ask in, more, appropriate question asking form. What am I even saying? Anyway, you get what I'm saying. But ultimately, what's the issue in getting Alvin Kamara involved in the offense? And we get the answer all the time. Well, we only ran so many plays, and I get that. I do understand that. But maybe you run more of the plays if you get the ball in the hands of the playmakers that can extend drives, right? That can pick up the first downs, that can do interesting things, creative things with the ball in their hands, those guys. So I do think that there is a little bit of part of this that is like, yeah, okay, you're not getting into the down distance game situations that you're looking for to be able to take advantage of certain shots, certain opportunities, things like that. But why wait? At the same time, like, these are your playmakers. Get these guys the ball in their hands. You have to do that. You got to start doing it with Alvin Kamara. And it's a shame to be saying this in December, right? Like, this should have been figured out a long time ago, for being honest. And Chris Olave becomes the other key here. Getting, being able to win off of press coverage. He's done it so well his entire career, but he's going up against a really, really physical guy in AJ Terrell this week. And AJ Terrell does not lose oftentimes against kind of the smaller, shiftier receivers. So Chris Olave is going to have to buck that trend. And so he is going to have to continue his success of winning off of press coverage. It's not a key of something that he's got to change or that he has to do differently than he usually does. No. All he has to do is do what he usually does, which is win in those situations. If he does that, then expect a big game from him. And maybe for him to gain a little bit closer or pick up a lot of ground in that race for the rookie receiving yards record for New Orleans Saints franchise, currently held by Michael Thomas. All right. Remember, coming up tomorrow, 2 episodes for you. We got our draft profile on Will Levis, and we're also going to take a look for our what would have been free agency Friday, but doing some interesting things there, just kind of looking at some of the players that we haven't talked about enough, some of the guys that might be coming back to the team and how they could contribute in 2023 as we look to the future. So I appreciate y'all very much for hanging with me, for being patient with me dealing with what I'm dealing with and everything like that. So I really, really appreciate you for your patience and for all the love. For more on your New Orleans Saints, make sure you're keeping it locked here as your first listen every single day. And for your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports today as well. Thank you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, say hi. And if you're looking for more around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know the families. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.